There are a lot of kids here. And if we catch you with a homosexual, the rest of your life will be a living hell. And you will be caught. Don't think you won't be caught.
Somehow being gay was the most terrible thing you could possibly be. I just didn't understand that.
The CBS News Public Opinion Survey indicates that sentiment is against permitting homosexual relationships without legal punishment.
Can you tell me how you and Mom met?
Sure. I think it was 1987 or 1988. And I had joined a gay running club called Frontrunners in New York City. I was fairly recently out to myself and to just some very close friends, and I wanted to meet people in the gay community. So I was a runner, and I thought, let me try this club.
They would meet on Saturdays in Central Park, and in fact the statue is still there. I can remember it's right in the middle of the park. And possibly on one of the first days I went to the club, I met Mama there. So we were all just, everybody met at the statue and then would go for runs around Central Park. And yeah, I remember that's where we met.
The funny thing about this is that Mom always remembered that we had met that day at that statue, and I hadn't. I had thought that our first meeting was at a dance held by the same running club back at that time in the meat market of New York City, where a lot of gay clubs were. But she was right. It was that statue.
Then there would sometimes be parties.
We met the second time at a dance held by Frontrunners with a lot of the 90s music beating away, and my memory is we just started talking in the middle of this dance floor as the music was beating, and we just talked and left that dance, and as we walked out, rats ran across the street, and we both screamed, and then I walked her to the bus stop, and then after that we met a few other times.
Can you tell me your first date?
Our first date was, oh boy, I believe we went to see a film in New York, and she was late.
There was a film that I'd read about called Long Time Companion, which had just come out, which was about the AIDS crisis, and it got great reviews. And because you know me well, you know I kind of feel things deeply. So it's shot at the Pines in New York City, and it's this group of men, and then slowly some of them get AIDS. It's you know, people die. It's like, so I was of course like sobbing, crying, watching this film, and I could see that Mama wasn't responding in the same way, and we talked about it later, and I think it was more because she was just nervous. But I remember thinking, like, how can you not be moved by this?
Okay, and then can you tell me coming out to your parents? What was that like?
Yeah, that was, I came out to my parents after I met Mom, and we had already been living together. So I would say we didn't live together for about 3 years since we started dating, until after about 3 years. And then we were living together in Astoria, in my grandmother's rent control department, after my grandmother moved out. And I came out to my mother first, and I did not have the intentions of coming out to my father. But when I came out to my mother, my grandmother was in the hospital. She was sick, and I just said, let's go have some breakfast, and we went to a diner near the hospital, and for some reason that day I just had to tell her, so I told her, and she said, you know, I had a dream about you and Claire, and in my dream, there was a huge photo of the two of you up above your couch. Instead of there was a huge mirror, but she said, and it was a photo of the two of you. So my mother knew.
I'd been gay in Australia and had not been out to my parents. The only person who I was actually out to in my family was my brother John, who actually said to me, Claire, you're gay, right? And I was like, yeah. Like, I was out to a lot of people there, but not to my parents. So this is like this is early 80s. And it just felt very hard to be out there.
And then we drove to my parents' house out on Long Island after the hospital, my mother and I, and she looked at me and she said, you have to tell your father, because if you don't, I'm going to, because I can't keep it from him. And it was interesting because I hadn't realized that my parents are that close. And so I had to very spontaneously come out to my very conservative Irish Catholic father that day.
By the time the 90s came along, I think I realised that this is really a stupid way to live, and living a lie kind of or pretending really doesn't do good things for you. It kind of stifles you a lot. So when Mama and I were together, I just realised I had to come out to my parents.
How'd that go?
Actually, it went well. It went well with both of them. It was certainly an adjustment. With my mother, she said, you have to give me my process. You know, I need to take this in. I mean, they, you know, that's what they were. That's what they said. And my father's, I was very surprised by my father. My mother needed more time. Grandpa said, okay. Of course, he said, I don't want to hear about your sex life. I said, don't worry, I won't be telling you about my sex life. And then he proceeded to tell me about one of his aunts when he was a child, who he was very close to. He grew up very poor and sometimes had to go live with various aunts and uncles because he said his family couldn't feed all the kids, and so he would be sent off to aunts and uncles, and his father was sick, and that's a whole other story. But he used to go stay with this aunt, and I always thought they were sisters. And I used to go with him when I was very young because he kept visiting them, these two aunts, and it ends up they were a lesbian couple. I always thought they were two sisters.
Finally, my mother said to me one day, which surprised me because I actually thought my mother was less aware, and in fact it was kind of great because it made me realise she'd been paying more attention than I thought. But she said, you know what, you need to be the one to speak to your father. It's important that it comes from you. So I maybe waited another half a day, and by then I know I'm sounding like I cry a lot, I don't cry that much, but anyway, by then I'd actually calmed down a bit and told my father, and it was interesting because he was a much more worldly kind of person. Like, he read news, and like we would always talk about political things, and even gay issues were beginning to come up. And it was interesting because I could actually see it was more of a surprise to him. But again, he was absolutely wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And, you know, I had a sense that for them it would take a bit of processing, and I'm like, I offered them books. No, we're fine. And they never once said anything negative. It was kind of just full of love. And then, you know, so I talked about Mama, about Anne, and, you know, Dad would call. So then once they knew that, and she picked up the phone, because there weren't mobile phones then, it was the landline, you know, they would always speak to her in a really nice way. And then the next time we went back, so then I went back to New York. The next time we flew to Australia, Mama came. And as soon as she got off the plane, they like gave her the biggest hug and kiss. And I was like, God, I love my family.
Could you tell me what you think of the gay rights movement now, and compare it to when you were around and acting?
Oh, I am so happy for gay youth coming out and being able to come out and having the support around them. It's not to say that that's always the case. We know that it's still hard for many people, but it has come a long way, and the marriage equality. Mom and I never thought it would happen in our lifetime, so that was amazing. We had to go the long road, the long journey, but it's been a long journey, but well worth it.
Okay, thank you, Mom.
Mm-hmm.